Okay, good afternoon, guys. It's the Good To Dude here, and I'm going to show you how to tween in Photoshop. What we're going to do is import a bunch of images as a stack in Photoshop, so each image will be on its own layer, and then we're going to create a frame animation using tweening. We're going to animate warp text, we're going to animate some effects tweening, and we're going to animate position tweening and opacity tweening. So here are some examples of past student work. Hopefully you have 7 or 8 images ready to import as a stack. And the first thing we're going to do is composite them. After we composite them, get rid of the background, then we'll position them and basically animate them and make it loop so it's smooth and eventually optimize it as a GIF. So first thing, go to Photoshop and create a new document by going to Scripts, File, Scripts, Load Files into a stack. So I'm going to locate my files. Hopefully you already created a folder on your computer, and you can Command A or Control A to select them all. Click Open. Click OK, and you should see the layers on the right side in Photoshop begin to become populated with your images. Now I have several different size images, so I'm going to go over the basics in Photoshop here in terms of image size and the move tool and moving things, rotating things, changing the scale of layers. So the first tool here is the move tool, in which you can just click on a layer and put it where you want, and on the corner you'll see a little square and you can resize your images that way. After you resize or rotate, you need to double click. But when you click on that first tool up there, the move tool, you also want to check out the menu bar here on the top in Photoshop and select two things. You want to check this one, auto select. So when you click on an image, it will select that layer for you. And then you also will definitely want this one here, show transform controls. So by default, I think in Photoshop, these are not on. When you click on that first tool, this menu changes for each tool. So make sure both of these are selected. Then you'll have an easier job selecting each layer that you want to work on and resizing. So I'm going to go ahead and basically resize a few of these images, and then I'm going to downsize my whole canvas because I want to use the photo as a background, this photo here. So I'm not going to upscale that because then the whole thing will degrade a little bit, the whole image. Instead, I'm going to make all these other images smaller than that one, and then I'm going to downsize or crop this image basically. So I'm going to put all of these kind of on top of each other, and then I'll crop it. And if you can't actually select an image, you can use the arrow keys, because sometimes it's tough when you have a bunch of images like stacked on top of each other. Anyways, what I want to do is get rid of all of this space. So I have, I don't know, what is that, 26 inches, and the width is 26 and the height is about 14, but we don't need all that, so I'm just going to crop. That is the 5th tool down, and make the whole thing smaller. Some of you may actually not need to do this until the very end, or you don't need to do this at all. Just depends on the image size. So when I zoom in, Command plus, now my background image will fill the screen and it won't be pixelated. So in terms of layers, you have your layer panel over here, and what you need to do is drag the layer that you want to use as your background to the bottom, or you could make your own layer, which is down here in the very bottom right. Just click that plus sign and you should have a blank layer. You could drag that to the bottom, and you could just click on the paint bucket and turn it to whatever color you want if you want to use a color in the background instead of an image. So that is the first step. So the next step is going to be compositing. Let's get our images ready, cleaned up basically. We want to delete the background of them so we can add effects to them. And so they're not rectangular in our montage. We want our montage to blend together some. So there's a few tools that are simple and quick to delete single colored backgrounds. Here's the magic wand. So the magic wand basically selects one pixel of one color that you click on, and then it selects similar colors of that or similar values of that hue or color depending on this number right here, tolerance. So when I just selected with the magic wand this green, which looks all consistent and the same, it didn't select it all. So that means I need to increase my tolerance number. It looks like they're all the same, but apparently they aren't. So I'm going to increase this. You basically want to find the magic number for the color or the area that you want to select. So notice these little running ants are everywhere around the green color. So that's perfect. If you want to select more areas, you hold down Shift, which I'm going to do, and you see that little plus sign right there. Hopefully you see the little plus sign. That means that we're going to add to this selection. And so I did it in both of those areas, and now I'm just going to press Delete on the keyboard. And zoom out a little bit. And make sure it's nice and clean, and it looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that layer temporarily right there with the eye icon, and then click on the camera, go back to the magic wand, click on the green, and press delete. I'm going to press Command D, as in deselect, to get rid of those running ants, and then I'm going to go to, I don't need that layer, I'm going to go to all the images and check them. So this one looks like a fake PNG. See the checkerboard background? It's actually not transparent. It is a graphical checkerboard. So I'm going to use the magic wand on that and see if it works. Looks like it did. I'm going to go to the last one, the baseball, and click on the green and delete it. So the main thing about the magic wand is finding the magic number. And then you can make your images smaller at any time, really. With that first tool we already talked about. So I want to make these smaller. I'm holding down Shift to kind of constrain it so it actually doesn't skew it. And then double click. So I'm going to go to each one of my images and resize them and arrange them. Put them wherever I feel I want for the animation that I'm about to make. So we have white there. I'm going to get rid of that with the magic wand also. Another tool you could use is the quick selection tool, which you just kind of like rub over the area and it selects it, and you can press delete, same kind of thing. But I prefer the magic wand. Another option is just the lasso tool, where you just draw around an area and then you can press delete. But hopefully you guys have solid color backgrounds, and you can just click on, make sure you're on the right layer, just click on the color you want to delete, hold down the Shift button if you have more areas, and then press delete. And then use the move tool to resize and put content or individual layers where you want them to be. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some effects. So I'm going to add a glow to several of these images. And I'll show you some other effects here in a minute. So what you want to do after you arrange everything is open up your animation or your timeline panel. And to do that with Adobe, you go up to a window and you just find the panel that you want to open. So we want to open up timeline. And first thing you're going to have to do when you open up that is click on this, create frame. It doesn't turn into a hand, but this is actually a button. And you have two options here. You could use a video timeline or a frame by frame. For this project, I would highly suggest use frame by frame. So we're going to start off with one frame here. And at first, I'm just going to show you how to add an effect. And I'm going to show you how to add text on this one frame. Basically, what we're going to do is duplicate this frame once we have what we want on there in terms of text and in terms of effects. We're going to duplicate it, and then on the second one, we're going to change things, whether it's position or the intensity of the effect or the amount of opacity, which is fade. So I'm going to show you all three of those. Animation in Photoshop is pretty limited, so there's certain things you cannot tween, like scale and rotation, but you can tween what I already mentioned, the position movements, the effects, and the opacity, or basically a fade in and a fade away. So let's begin with the text that I was wanting to show you. So you can click on the type tool, click on the canvas, and then type whatever you want. In this case, it will be something about your identity. Up here's where the color is. You can change the actual size up here, or you can change the size like we've been doing with the bounding box. And then you just drag it to move it in place. So I have 8 images here. And I've arranged them where I want, and now I want to add some effects. So for my name, the effect that I'm going to add is like a drop shadow. So it pops out a little bit more. So what you do to add an effect is click on the layer that you want to add an effect to, click on FX, and then go to the effect you want. So for this particular one, I'm going to add a drop shadow. And I'm going to see what it looks like here in a second with blend or bevel. So what you do once the layer panel opens up is select the layer effect that you want and then modify it here. So I'm going to zoom out so I can see the drop shadow and see how it works or how it looks. Increase the spread, increase the size, and just kind of tinker with these until I get what I like. I do also want to add a bevel and just see what it looks like. So you have to click on that to actually see the actual effects, and then you can modify all these just like we did with the other one. And once you have what you like, you just click OK. So on this layer, on the type layer, I have 2 effects. I'm going to go ahead and add an effect on these other ones here. Not the drone, but let's go to baseball and the apple. So effect, and I'm just going to keep these simple, and I'm going to keep them real quick. Actually, I'm not going to add the glow because you already know how to do an effect. So I'm going to do a fade in. So the camera is going to fade in, but on the first frame of this animation, the camera is going to be almost invisible. So on this layer, I want to decrease the opacity. And I'm going to drop it all the way down to like 10 so we can barely see it. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing to the drone on the left side. So I'm going to select that and just go to opacity and decrease it. And have those fade in at the same time. And then I'm going to have the apple and baseball and UT all glow. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and do it just because I want to create a final product that looks decent. So I'm going to go to outer glow. If I can find it. Sorry for my delay. I like the blue. I'm just going to click OK. Hey, Scruffy. Shh. My dog is over there crying and whining. Okay, on this one here, I'm going to go to effects, outer glow again, and this time I'm just going to change the color. And I like that burnt orange UT style, so I'm just going to keep that. Click OK and OK, and on the apple top right, effect, outer glow. And what would be a good color since we have blue, we have a cool and a warm, and I'm going for balance, but I just want to make this pop out. So we will go with some red. Let's see what we think about that. Looks a little intense. And so I actually am going to decrease these effects, and then they're going to increase again in the tween. They're going to decrease and then increase. So I have 2 fade-ins that are going to happen and 3 glow effects. And there was one more. Oh yeah, the text warp. So in terms of the text warp, on this layer, on the text, you click on the type tool, and then up here on the top, you have a little warp option, type warp. So I'm going to click on that, zoom out, and just modify this. In terms of the tween and a text warp, it has to stay the same style. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and have this be pretty minor right now. So in the middle of the tween, it's going to go to 50, and then it's going to go back to 0, basically. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So there we go. We have all these layers ready. They're composited, and they're ready to tween. We're going to tween, like I said, opacity tween and glow tween, which is the Photoshop layer effect. And then we're going to tween the warp text. So that's our next step.
Okay, animators, it's time to tween. Let's do this. So make sure you have your timeline panel open, and if you don't, go up to Window on the menu bar and open it up. I've arranged all the images, I've added effects, I've added decreased opacity, and now it's time to use the timeline panel. So, first thing you probably want to do is create a new frame. When you do that, we have 2 frames that are identical. What we want to do is make a change or multiple changes on one of the frames and then tween. And here's the tween button. So, on frame 2, I'm going to change multiple effects and opacities of different layers. So we'll just start with the drone on the left side. It's going to fade into 100% opacity. Same with the camera on the right side. Just going to crank up opacity to 100 on both of those. And I'm going to tween in between these. I'm going to tween in between these. I'm going to create combinations too. So the other thing I wanted to do was change the text to make it warp more. So once again, you select the text layer, go to the warp tool, make sure you have the same style, change the parameter to whatever you prefer, and then click OK. The other things I'm going to change are the amount of glow on these other 3 objects. So quickly, I just double click on the effects layer underneath the layer that I want to change, and then click on the appropriate style over here, and then you just change whatever you prefer. So I'm going to decrease that one and do the same to the other 3. On a different style, so be careful there. And that's it. Now we're about to tween by clicking on, well, let me finish this. Getting ahead of myself here. Okay, we're going to tween by clicking on the tween button right here. And when you do that, it prompts you and asks you how many frames, or what do you want to tween with. We want to tween with the previous frame, how many frames to add, that's up to you. Think of smoothness, but you also have to think about your optimized GIF and how small you want the file size to be, so it loads as fast as possible on websites. So you don't want to have too many frames. We're aiming, for about 40 or 50 frames altogether. So how many frames we're going to add? We're going to add 5, and you can keep all of these the same. So now we have a tween. seconds. Just notice that. You can change any of these at any time. Sometimes Photoshop has the first one by default set on 5 seconds or 10 seconds. I'm not sure why, but just pay attention. You can change them all at the same time if you shift and select. But first we should just play it and see if we like the speed and the spacing. So it seems a little fast to me, but what I plan on doing is selecting all of them and then changing the timing and experimenting, which is 0.1 seconds there. And let's see what we think about that. I think that's much better, more appropriate. And we're going to reverse these. So we're going to go to that first frame and we're going to duplicate this. There's several ways to do it. I'm going to hold down Alt and drag to the right, and now I have a duplicated frame. You could also go to the right drop-down menu all the way over here on this panel and copy the first frame and then paste it if you like. Anyways, we're going to tween these two now. So basically it's going to go back to how it was, and I'm going to make it go back a little slower though. So let's go ahead and try 8. It's going to do the exact same thing we did before, but I've added 3 frames and we're going in the opposite direction. So now we have a smooth looping animation. And now we have tweened opacity, we've tweened effects, and we've tweened warp text. So that's the basics of tweening. Now let's say you want to tween on top of a tween, or you want to tween on top of multiple frames. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to just make a change here of some sort, and what I'm going to do is add a glow to my name. Or no, I guess I already did that. Oh no, I have a drop shadow. Let's see what I have. Drop shadow. Yeah, let's add a glow right there in the middle, on the middle frame. I'm going to go out of the glow. I'm going to choose a different color that kind of pops out, and make sure it's not too intense. And notice that this does not happen on any other frames, but we want it to the glow to gradually fade in. So I shift selected all of these frames, and I'm going to click on the tween button. And what it will do is just tween that effect. So once again, I created a glow on this frame 8, and I want it to gradually tween away. So I'm going to shift select 8 to 16, and then just click on the tween button. So that is how you tween in Photoshop. Last step, I guess, would be to save it as a GIF. So we want to check the image size and make sure it's not too large to make a GIF of. And this is a good size. This is appropriate. It's less than 1,000 pixels in both dimensions. The resolution's appropriate for the internet, so that's practically already optimized. But to optimize, as a reminder, you go to Save or File, Export, Save for Web, and then the optimization panel comes up, which we've talked about before, and we want to turn this into